Right. All right. Cool. This is gonna be a well, it's a long time coming, but we're finally back with the Jailhouse Parlor interview episode. I got Aaron Bryant back. We're gonna talk about
Hi.
yeah. Hi, buddy. How you been?
I have been many things. Up, down, all around, back here and home again. Do, do, do. There's some kind of musical thing I was trying to imitate, but then I lost it halfway through.
You had the melody in your head and it didn't play out. That's okay. That's okay.
It
Well,
didn't.
so for today, for at least this JHP interview, this is actually one of the more purposeful, or one of the few purposeful JHP interviews that I've done. Not that any of them were accidents. It's more this one has a focus. Because last time we were on, we were just talking mad shit with you and everything. But this one is much more about a game design that you've been working on. So I wanted to start this framing on out. Is that you've built a game, or you're in the midst of building a game, and
hmm
and there's a reason why you've actually been building this game.
I like making games.
Well, that's one that's a very good opening reason for it. I know you like to make
um,
games. I've tested out one or two for you.
but I've been I've just been in the zone with it recently in terms of making it. But what specific reason are you referring to? Because I'm sure if you said it, I would remember, but I can't.
So, all
I
right.
feel like there's a specific thing I said at some point, and now I can't remember.
Yeah, so the background for you, as I understand, is that you've been playing D&D and tabletop games since like you were 11. All right.
Okay,
And you've
okay.
been
I
so
think
you've
I
been yeah.
remember
I'm gonna keep
now.
going, but you're gonna get
Keep
the
going.
reins here for the cherry, I guess. But you've been playing tabletop D&D specifically, but you've been playing a lot of tabletop games. You've been making games for a long ass time, and as anyone who has great passion about good gameplay or good gameplay experiences is passionate about D&D, um, eventually you might just find yourself overly familiar with something and end up finding faults with it. It's kind of, the honeymoon phase
Yeah.
is over, and now it's like, alrighty, I need to let you know you're a bitch.
So yeah, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 11. So that's now 17 years. Yep,
It's
17 years of my life. And there was a point, I think it was like 5 years ago, where I just started realizing Dungeons and Dragons, I love it for what it does to the community and the bridge point that it is for a lot of people, but it is a bad role playing game. And I hope that that take is not too spicy for people, because when I say that, I don't mean that it's bad that you like it, because I like it. I just also hate it. It's very complicated. Um, it's got really great combat simulation in it, which is lovely, you know. But as far as the elements of role play go, it feels very toothless in that. Its entire game structure feels like every single solution to something has to be either success or failure, and usually combat related.
mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, that depends on whether or not you have a really good person running the game, or um, you have some homebrew stuff thrown in there. And that's one of the great things about a lot of role playing games, because they're a social contract between people, and every single role playing game is, in fact, a social contract between people.
Yeah.
Um, you can agree upon what is or isn't going to be used and modify everything to that point. The problem is most people don't want to put that much thought into it, and that's not a bad thing on people.
No, it's very
For the
hard
long,
to.
yeah,
It's very hard to become good actors or good role players effectively for a game you play
yeah,
once a week. You might play for 4 hours, but it's not like people are getting trained on how to get better at it. They're just improvising their way
yeah.
through as DMs and as players.
And however you want to have fun with the game, no one should ever take that away from you.
Yeah.
And regardless of what I say here, if you have fun playing Dungeons and Dragons your way, don't fucking listen to me.
Yeah.
Don't fucking listen to me. Have fun with D&D your way.
But if you don't like how Dungeons and Dragons limits, we might have a game. Well, so that actually ends up bringing up a very interesting thing, because I am basically still a newbie. I'm still a child as it relates to D&D as just even a player. I'm still in the world of, at least for how my brain works, it's give me a pre-made character, and let me just play it out, just because that gives me one thing to try to become the best I can based on whatever it was given, whatever is given in before I got it. I am very bad with the idea of you can make whatever you want. I'm like, that is such a valueless structure. It's like, here's infinity, now do something with it. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm not Buzz Lightyear. I am unable to take that infinity and go beyond. But what I end up getting the impression from, with your experience and also just what's led you down to Rad Wasteland, is that D&D, even with the 5e book, is that D&D is very structured in terms of the world, the places, the lands, the mechanics of, let's say, I guess, skill checks, but effectively combat, because it is a combat simulator, like even in the name of it. And so after a certain point, all of the best role-playing things that we hear about, see about, read about, that all ends up just coming from the players themselves. It comes from the DM and the players, like actually like entrenching themselves even further into the game instead of just following like what's in the book. Would that be a fair assessment?
And to that point, because I do believe that what you said is fair, I think that in any game, the best things are going to come from the players always.
Yes, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it can't be well more elevated due to what's in the books.
Yeah.
I can words with my mouth sometimes.
On most days. So that ends up becoming that kind of the question as it relates to the structure, because the structure of D&D, at least the scaffolding, the foundation of D&D is the book. Is the book that at least tells you how to play the game and stuff like that, and then all the other fun creative stuff comes from the players and the people. So my question is, well, are you trying to build a book that sets up that creativity more effectively and like makes it much more happen much more purposefully than the structure of D&D, let's say? Like the D&D structure
that's pretty.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the D&D structure doesn't limit, but it doesn't encourage or provide framework around the role-playing aspect of the game.
Yeah, and I would say that what you said is fairly accurate, actually. The way that I want to frame most of what's done in my games is through the lens of giving someone as many colors as they need to paint the picture that they want. And for instance, an example that I can give from yesterday, I was doing some playtesting, and we have one of the classes is called the Gambler, and it as a class is one of the more unique ones, I think, because the mechanics of that class focus on manipulating the dice outside of the in-game world. Like you're manipulating
out of table
dice
in
the real world with that through the use of magic. So their character was like very lucky. And then they one of the backgrounds that they picked was haunted, and one of the abilities that you get for having a haunted background is that you can draw negative effects that happen to other people to you. So they were looking over it and they were like, this is super cool. I think I just built a luck tank. And I was looking over it.
That's what that sounds like.
And I was looking over it and I was like, this is something I didn't even think of myself. At no point did I ever think of combining these two things to make that. And I was like, that's so fucking unique and interesting. So there's a lot of like different things that you can do, because a note that I've gotten from a lot of people, and it's probably one of the most encouraging ones, is that the backgrounds that I have for my game feel like a class in and of themselves.
Define what you mean by backgrounds, because are we talking backdrop of the setting, or are we talking the backgrounds of the
Oh, back
characters?
like personal backgrounds.
Okay.
So what your character was doing prior to you picking them up, basically.
So, because
Um,
I have read, I did read through Blood and Sand, but after a certain point, it is a kind of document that like gets in the weeds for it. So I guess the simple layman's question is that, are you providing structural background in terms of very simple sentences in your handbook, basically, that say this kind of person had this, relatively speaking, this kind of background, and that in
mhm.
so so the mechanic's going to have a mechanic's background. Now the player gets to actually color that in much more, but at least you're giving them the lines with which to fill in that coloring book, let's say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Basically, and I like to say to anyone whenever they're making something that mechanics don't need to be colored. I don't care, Alexa, I'm talking to someone. Anyways, so I always like to tell people whenever they're playing, you can color your mechanics however you want.
Mm-hmm.
Really, mechanics are just a vessel to let you do something that you want to do, and however you flavor it is your own. Like somebody was asking me, um how do I make like just a straight up wizard in this? And I was like, well, that's not really like a thing, but if you want to be someone who doesn't really take their like power from like a religious iconography, you can just pick one of the classes and say that you're just imbuing yourself with the power. I'm not
Yeah.
going to hold that against you. um how did we get here? What was the
Well, we were
original
you were going
question?
along sort of class design, and you basically just articulated out that like there's no wizard class, because Rad Wasteland, for those that don't know, is has a sort of Western desert gunslinger Stephen King esque vibe to it, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably the better place to start. So
Yeah,
the
let's
the
open it up.
setting for
Let's
this.
open it up. Hi, this is Aaron Bryant, and I'm Aaron.
Listen,
I'm Aaron Solomon.
I'm also Aaron. Hey,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what's
Oh, I was on a call. I bet it was with one of your playtesters, actually, a mutual friend of ours, and
Marl?
yes, and I had a laugh because they were calling me Aaron and they were calling you Bryant or something like that, like the reversal. Because you call me Solomon whenever we're in the same room, and I was like, I'm okay being Solomon while he's Aaron. I have no problems with this. And then I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
but like that. But we started playing with it. He's like, well, now he's like A Bryant or A Bryant. I was like, no, uh he's he's Baron. He's now Baron.
I love that.
But now it's spelled Bearon, because bear is one of your iconographies for Hema. And they're like, that fits well. I'm
I
just like, he's gonna love this.
I
I know
love
he
that.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
an alternate naming class for when we're in IRL issues.
fuck yeah. Okay, so Rad Wasteland, as a setting, takes place in essentially like the 26th century, after every single thing that could have gone wrong, from environmental catastrophes to financial catastrophes, nuclear catastrophes, pretty much everything's gone wrong.
The entire floor is covered in
Um,
Legos.
yes, basically. At a certain point, magic was discovered, and there was an apocalypse that happened because of magic too. And now we're left with the world in the state that it's in, which is just goddamn awful. Just as a general blanket statement. And the setting that I've written so far is the United Coastal Cities. It's what's left of America, and essentially most of the meat, and I say that because I can't find a better word for it, of America is now blasted lands. The inlands of America, if
Yeah.
that makes
The Midwest
more
is
sense.
gone. The Dust Bowl is again a Dust Bowl. And
It's a real bowl of dust. It's not that fakey bullshit bowl of dust.
gosh.
Um, So most people just survive on the coasts. The most powerful city in America now is New Orleans, and the reason why is because the Mississippi runs through it. Now there are other large bodies of water that do pretty well, but having the entirety of the Mississippi basically makes you the biggest provider of clean water to the whole of the coast. Bless you.
Thank you. Important question, seeing as we're both from that
Yeah.
state. Did Florida survive the multiple apocalypses, or has that dick been chopped off?
Fuck no. Florida's underwater now. That being said, there's still people who live in the area that was Florida.
Yeah,
It's just literally a giant swamp now. And
so
they have gators.
it's returned to its normal state.
Exactly. 100%.
When there's no,
And it's got
I've told people this. If there was no AC, no one would live on the inlands of Florida.
yeah. No,
There'd only be people on the
not a
coast,
single
and the
person.
entire inside would be surrendered to alligators, hillbillies, and
So
cocaine.
yeah, that's exactly what Rad Wasteland is. Basically, the rest of the world is now Florida, just dry. Because I can deal with a dry Florida. I can't deal with a wet Florida, which is what Florida always is.
Yes. Okay.
Um,
So it's because I always picture like a western, like Red Rock, when I think of Rad Wasteland, because it's got a western vibe to it, but it is basically just like the environment's regressed or returned in a way because of all the horrible things. But now we're entering this just straight on out. Instead of having the medieval D&D thing of druids, of knights, of wizards and stuff, now it's all right. What would be the iconoclassing?
iconography
Well,
or the iconoclastic classes.
yes, because I can also words
Okay.
with my mouth.
We're here to support each other, man.
Yeah.
I would say one of the probably the most quintessential imageries that you could conjure up when looking at Rad Wasteland is the classic gunslinger. That's like I would say the warrior of
Yeah.
our game.
Yeah.
Someone who's just quick as hell with a gun, knows how to fire it, and is able to survive in that kind of environment merely on the basis of he just doesn't die first.
Yeah. So it's Django in Florida.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Now, I would say the second thing would probably be a mechanic.
Okay.
Because a lot of this world relies on old technologies that aren't completely understood, and cars are kind of a quintessential thing in here. Like if you don't have a car, you're usually stuck somewhere. You can also have horses and whatnot. That's a thing they have, but I'd say that it's more from a visual standpoint. The things that I see would be like a mechanic, someone fixing it. And then in terms of magic, I love all three of the like biggest magic groups that I've made, but the number one thing I would think is a voodoo, which is an offshoot of hoodooism and voodoo culture that we understand.
No,
So those
okay.
I say.
So is that like the necromancy kind of lateral, or because voodoo is taking control of another body, at least for all of the pop culture lessons that I've gotten about voodoo, it is they have a doll of you, which means now they can torture you and control you with this sock puppet.
So they do have the doll. That is part of their toolkit, but the whole necromancy thing, while it is a thing, it's not nearly as
It's not a core identity.
Yeah, it's not nearly as core to the beliefs of voodoo magic or hoodoo magic, excuse me, as we understand it. It's much more curses and manipulatory magic, turning things your way slightly. Like the doll itself at first is not even a tool for just stabbing the shit out of someone. It's a tool to make it more difficult for them to do something. I in fact, aside from them being a magic class, I would say that they're a social class as well, because they're very good at manipulation and pulling strings to get things that they want.
Right.
The gunslinger is more of a combat and exploration kind of class, someone who can live out in the wastelands. And then the mechanic is a technology and brainy boy. You know, he fixes things and he knows how to stay calm in a scenario when shit's breaking down around him.
Let me see your character creation.
Blood and Sand is like a super reduxed version of what we have, and it's kind of only like combat based stuff.
Yeah, I was just kind of trying to look around in the two docs to see about anything, because while I do want to be able to connect what is common knowledge, at least to me, for D&D elements to Rad Wasteland, I also am trying to let you have like a free flow about this, because you know, I'm sort of just learning to understand what an advantage roll versus a disadvantage roll, and I believe, if I've understood the 2 to 3 hours of Critical Role that I've watched, advantage roll is that you roll the 2 dice and you pick the higher number. Disadvantage roll, you would roll the 2 dice and pick the lower number. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. Yes.
Yay! I learned something, and I inferred the other half of it. But it sounds like mechanics like I just described for the even more broad audience is that certain things like that would be in the play of manipulation for the. Is it a voodoo character or is it a hoodoo character? Because is voodoo actually correctly pronounced hoodoo, like Mexico is pronounced Mexico and Hawaii is pronounced Hawaii?
So
or
voodoo is the popularized name of hoodoo. Hoodoo is the actual like religion. It's kind of like, this is a terrible example, but it's the easiest one I can think of for myself. It's kind of like when people call a longsword a great sword because someone's using it with 2 hands. That's not what that is. It's not a great sword, and an arming sword is not a long sword, and most people think an arming sword is a fucking long sword. And I hate that.
Well, so I think the example itself could be a good enough example. Is that how is hoodoo actually like spelled?
Hold on, let me pull that up because I don't want to misrepresent.
There's a lot of issues where the characters are the same, but how each character is pronounced in words is different. And we can notice this very easily in America, in the difference between a Boston and like a Southern accent, and which parts of a word are emphasized, as opposed to how certain words that were brought over from Europe or that were integrated from Indian and Spanish cultures have just been repronounced. Like I was saying, Mexico is actually correctly pronounced in Spanish, Mexico, and and the same could be said for Hawaii or other. There's plenty of other examples. I just can't think of more than that right now.
So the spelling is Hoodoo.
Yeah. So at some point, like the common nomenclature just turned it into voodoo because of some combination of things.
Yes.
Or something like that.
So even in the definition, a religion practiced in the parts of the Caribbean and southern U.S. and characterized by sorcery and spirit possession, voodoo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm also reminded of how the original salutation from like a millennia ago was "God be with you," and eventually that actually got condensed so much so that now it's goodbye.
Huh.
So yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. So cool. So you put out at least 3 out of, like, how many classes would you say there are? Because it's classes, and then what's the next sort of breakdown? Is just is the background of the class character?
So there's races, classes, backgrounds, and burdens. Those are the 4 like pillars of character creation.
Now, could you describe what a burden is?
Yes. Okay. So a burden really doesn't have a mechanical factor overall. It can, but that's not its purpose. A burden is a narrative string for the DM to pull on. Let me actually pull
is it
up
something like the life purpose, or is it just like the tragic backstory? Um, and
it can be a lot of different
and my follow up, if you
things.
want to throw in the back of your brain, is like, how is that burden sort of created? Um,
Let me pull it up real quick. Oh God, is this on light mode? Oh, I hate seeing bright white light. It hurts my eyes.
bless.
Background. Where's the burdens? There we go. Come on, take me to the page. Nope, that's not.
Yeah, it looks like you didn't put page numbers on these things.
There it is. All right. So it's on page 75 of my editing copy, which is the thing I've been using the most. So there's addiction, betrayal, blackmail, bounties, criminals, debt, duty bound, family, favor, oath, obsession, responsibility, cursed, catastrophe, victory in all things, secrets, amnesia, love, and social outcast. And basically you roll a D100 and one of those pops up, and they can go either one way or the other in terms of like bounty. You could have a bounty on someone else that you have and you're hunting them down, and that is a narrative pull that you have. It's a thing that your character is doing. And conversely, you can have a bounty on you, and that's something that you have to deal with in the world. It itself is not a mechanical instrument, but it does.
It's a narrative instrument.
Yeah, it's a narrative instrument, and it's something that your character has to contend with while surviving in the wasteland, because it's a harsh world out there.
Yeah. So my question is, what is a relative example? I don't know if it was able to be experienced in any of your playtests, but what is, because if if the burden aspect doesn't have a clear mechanic, like say during combat or whatever, or during, I guess, social interactions, um, is the burden only being brought up by the effective DM or by the player as needed for, I guess, the role playing aspect?
It can be brought up by both, and I would say if your player is bringing it up on a consistent basis, and they're almost putting themselves at and they're almost putting themselves at a detriment to enact and enable the use of that burden. You as a GM should be rewarding them for basically putting negatives on their own character for the purpose of story. But there's lots of little things that you can do to enact that. There's a system in the game, and a lot of this game is built off of the bones of the Star Wars FFG game, which if you're listening to this and you haven't played the Star Wars FFG game, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and it is the core of where I came from with a lot of the mechanics that I have now. It's different enough that it's not the same in any
Star Wars
significant
Fantasy
way.
Flights game? Star Wars.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Is that like the D&D version of Star Wars or something like that, or is it something else? Because I know there's Star Wars. I know people that want to get us in their Star Wars D&D games or whatnot. So I just want to make sure that's. But yeah, for those that want to know what Star Wars FFG stands for, it's Star Wars Role Playing Fantasy Flight Games. Looks to be it. It's under fantasyflightgames.com.
Yeah. So I would say that calling it the D&D of Star Wars is accurate. There's a whole bunch of different Star Wars systems that were made and implemented throughout the years that never really saw much success. But I would say that one's probably one of the better games that was ever made.
Okay.
Mainly because of the narrative system that it's taken, and I've tried to expand a lot on that. Anyways,
so you're taking so that's where you're taking just to bring us back before we got on the FFG split off. You were talking about like the I guess the narrative mechanics as related to the burden and how those could be brought in, I believe.
Yeah. So for instance, one of the characters that we made yesterday got an oath as one of their burdens. And they were playing in the Kingdom of California, which in this setting,
That
California
feels like a
has
real thing. That feels like a
in this setting, California has become a an actual what is it called? Feudal society has become a feudal society.
That still feels accurate. That still feels accurate.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you were talking about, you know, we're stepping away from, like, you know, knights and elves and fantasy and whatnot. The Kingdom of California is the most like fantastical place in the UCC, and it has, like, because of the feudal society, it has knights, it has
Are these people that
like
are named
people.
knights, basically, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's still like modern. Well, not modern. It's a
It's
lot
Rad
of.
Wasteland modern in terms of gunslingers and stuff, but they are actually named knights and things like that.
Yeah, and so the guy, one of the characters had an oath to a lady of a village, and her name was Lady Pierce, um, and her castle, quote unquote, was a mansion on a hill,
Mm-hmm.
um, about 10 miles away from a place that the Kingdom of California referred to as the Holy Woods, which is really where Hollywood was, and one of the L's fell off of the sign. They literally interpreted it as a sign from God
So the Mormons
as
kept
to what.
going west, is what I'm hearring. Once war
Yes.
came to the Salt Lake Valley, they went west again.
For legal
They found a new
reasons,
body of salt water and decided this is our new home.
but yeah, the Kingdom of California is like the most fantastical place. Anyways, the guy had an oath as a burden to Lady Pierce, and we were able to basically build an entire like pre-narrative for his character just from that, you know, one element. And
Yeah.
his character has the motivation of serving his lady. Now, he could eventually find out something that makes him not want to do that, like if she was a total fucking asshole and was murdering children, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then he'd be like, well, she's evil, oh fuck. But for the purposes of right now, she's, you know, how to describe it, vassal based societies, honor to them means something completely different to what we interpret honor as.
Mm-hmm.
um in any kind of feudalism, honor is obeying the will of your betters, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So if your king told you to go out and cut down a village because the peasants were revolting, the honorable thing to do would be to go cut down those villagers.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a wild concept for a lot of people, but basically anyone in the position of authority was kind of brainwashed into thinking,
Yeah.
listening to me is the best thing that you can possibly do.
Yeah, it's an over respect for the hierarchy in play.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. But yeah, that came from the burden system. Another character was a godsman, which
Mm-hmm.
is someone who has holy magic, basically. And he had an obsession with Lady Pierce. But she was like directly opposed to a lot of what the church did.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those things where the character had like conflicting emotions based on, you know, what they were supposed to be serving versus what they wanted.
Yeah.
And honestly, he was my favorite character in that playtest session, just because he had the most like what's the word I'm looking for? Things
Yeah,
tugging
yeah,
at
yeah.
him.
Two things. Yeah, two sides pulling him. I think this is just a thought, and I do actually just thought of some things to sort of run by you because we can actually I can structure this next bit out a little bit better. Um, so it almost sounds like so. I think one detriment that could happen for people that have never tried to be creative before is that you
Hmm.
gift them the entire book of 5e. You tell them here's the set of classes that are in D&D, and now create a whole character. Meanwhile, you're sitting there going like, here are your actual blanks. Fill it out. Because like on Fantasy Grounds, where I play with the current group we play with, it's like here's your character background. It's got like gender, race, height, weight, and then just notes. And it's like I have to
Yeah.
fill this notes section with just a full story of a character, and you're like, no, we're gonna go into that notes section, and we're like, here's something that actually ties you. Like you're giving someone, you're instead of telling someone to be the script writer, you're telling them to actually just be the actor. You're taking away the script writing part of it and saying like, here's your character.
That's a fair way to look at it, and I never thought of it that way myself, but I don't dislike that,
Well, here's
because
what I think we can do next. Actually, is that because I was listening to this, and obviously what you're going to be referring to is mostly play testing, not full like 6 months of playing this game on a regular basis with a group,
yeah,
which we'll talk about that at a later date for the resources that we all have. Um, but what I wanted to kind of ask is kind of what is character creation in this game? Because is there a session zero for setting up the world like as it is or as it's going to be and creating all the characters with all the other players there? um
mhm.
is there an and this could be like a case by case basis, but what is in your mind the expectation of session one, two, zero, one, and two, so to speak? um
for
and then
for
after
me
that, yeah,
personally,
and then after that we
oh,
can go into like the deeper parts of character creation, like what that process looks like
yeah,
or feels like, if that's a DM player relationship that's done in the sessions, let's say.
yeah. For me personally, I always think that a session zero is what's going to give you the highest caliber of play, um,
Across any game,
and
or is this just?
across any game.
Mhm.
It's just like a blanket statement. A session zero is for the betterment of everyone, because you can talk about expectations for the game, you can talk about what you guys want to play, you can hash out like backstories with each other, former relationships that you might have had, bonds between the characters, and so on and so forth. There's no reason not to have a session zero unless every single person there is literally just there to play the Munchkins version of a role playing game, which is kick open doors, kill monsters, get loot, which is not a bad thing. I'm
Yeah,
not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's a specific type of game. And if that's what people are there for, then that's fine. For me, though, I want a story. I want interesting characters and I want dynamics between those characters.
yeah,
Um, so it's session zero, and I'm pretty sure when I write the full rule book out, I'm going to say that in the framework that it's required.
hmm, right.
Just because framework usually helps people
Well,
get their own
you're
brains.
reminding me of the rules as it relates to improv in the very basic rule set that I got in my little bit of training. But
Hmm.
like you said, if you just want to go in and just play some balls to the wall chaos of, we're not going to prep anything, we're all going to come in with our own individual ideas of our characters, and then it's kind of on the group and the DM to figure out how do we make these five characters have a reason
Fit together.
fit together. It's like you could try that and and see how that goes, um, or you could set up all of the in the improv metaphor that I'm thinking of. You could set up all the conceptual reasons or things that make the whole thing work, so to speak. Like you don't have to write out the
Yeah.
whole damn story, but you do need to have in improv. You need a lot of base concepts and decent conceptual training for acting and for yes and all the layers below yes and. Um, but that's where I think you putting a high recommendation on a session zero so people can put out the foundations of the characters and how they relate It's like, okay, cool, we have our foundation, and now after that we can improvise off of that foundation. It's very hard to just improvise into the ethereal and actually, be able to go somewhere with that. At some point, someone's gonna have to overly compromise their character's like narrative, if you will. At least that's what I would think.
No, yeah, no, that is a thing that happens a lot. And then people are like, it doesn't feel like my character would, want this. And that is one of the worst feelings that you can have when you're playing the game. Because what's the fucking point of being someone else if you're not going to be that fucking person?
Yeah. Well, it's
Right?
even when you're being that person and you realize, if I'm going to be like an honest representation of this character, I shouldn't even be with this group.
And real life note, that's exactly what you should think about when you're doing something in real life and you're like, this doesn't feel like something that I should be doing or that I would do. It's the same exact thing. Get yourself out of that situation and find something better for you. Hashtag something positive. I don't know.
Prune your friends list, everyone.
Fix it in editing. Fix it in editing.
Prune your friends list, everyone. Prune it.
So anyways, so I like to have a session 0 for sure. During session 0, we talk about, and to me, I think the most important thing is, at least in the terms of Rad Wasteland, where you guys are starting. Because the differences between the different areas of the UCC is stark and causes completely different styles of gameplay. If you want to start in the jungles of Washington, and yes, I'm talking about Seattle, Washington, not Washington, DC, and yes, it is jungles now. If you want to start in the jungles of Washington, that is going to be a game that's a lot of like hexagraphical exploration, frontiersmanship, essentially, going into the unknown, and dealing with basically being an invading force on someone else's land. Think early Americans versus Native American, or early immigrants versus Native Americans.
Yeah, but instead of Native Americans, it's hillbillies.
I won't say that, but yeah. If you start in the Kingdom of California, it's going to be a much more fantastical kind of adventure, because in the Kingdom of California, they have fucking crag dragons, which are just giant monitor lizards that are overgrown to the umpteenth degree, but there's codes of chivalry and ethics, and most of this is based off of like old movies that these people worship like their gospel. Like
Casablanca is their Passion of the Christ, or
that's basically, yeah, that's the example that you want to go with. Yeah.
Princess Bride guides their morals.
I will 100% support that statement. The Great Texas Divide. You know how Texas is already basically a barren wasteland?
I've driven through it.
Even more so, because it's like the one part of the UCC that isn't actually coastal.
I feel like, and you can steal this, I feel like Texas could become a mining state for old guns.
It 100% actually already is.
Like you just pull up a Winchester, and because of the quality of gun manufacturing in the 2000s,
people go to Texas as prospectors to find old weapon tech. Yeah. Yes. That's literally a thing that exists.
I'm so happy you thought of this. I'm so happy you thought of this. It's not the gold rush, it's the Winchester rush. Remington's in this river, rush. I swear.
For normal people, they go through Texas on the train rail. Like no one wants to walk through Texas.
No, you're gonna.
It's
Yeah.
one of the deadliest places in the Waste because it's basically the Barrens, just more easily accessible. Louisiana is where I would say you would want to start the campaign if you want high intrigue and social games with a lot of magic thrown in, but not necessarily like fucking fireballs and shit. More like social magics, like the voodoos. Pardon me. Florida, if you want a heavy exploration game, you would go there because most of Florida's underwater. You would be like exploring old sea worlds
and swamp
if you can
like that.
get access to them.
This game is snapshotting like America in like 2000 to 2020, just snapshotting it and turning it into like
don't at me. You're gonna make the government come after me, bro.
But yeah, it's like, why is there nothing but this mouse all around Central Florida? There's nothing but this mouse iconography. They find that one like electrical pole out there towards Kissimmee that's just one big mouse head. Like, you know, when you're going on I-4, and it's just like, is this their idol? Is this what they worship? And the answer is yes.
This is God.
Bow before me, bitches.
Gosh, I sure hope you all have fun on your knees. Now suck. Anyways,
God damn
it. Maryland is essentially like a pirate themed. I'm not gonna say like yo ho.
I was actually expecting pirates to be a regular part on any of the coastal cities in a way. It's just which one's gonna have like which one's which one's a pirate home, you know, which one's Tortuga.
Maryland is I would say the home along the East Coast, and the Caribbeans, which are still a thing, are the homes along the trade routes for New Orleans. But there's also, like, when I say pirates, I mean the campaigns around there would be much more navally focused, because there's giant fucking crabs, and being a crabber in Maryland, it's dangerous now, but way in the future is way more dangerous because the crabs are, 20 feet tall and can pick up your fucking boat.
You're trying to hunt a blue whale-sized animal that can pinch you.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
And then New York is basically just this gigantic labyrinth of concrete. And the amount of things that are lost, the amount of people that are lost, and the amount of just horrific shit that is lost within the ruins of New York is pretty much uncountable. It's an tunnel.
Yeah. Because there's got to be parts of it that are still civilized, like but there's other parts, like Central Park's just got to be its own little jungle. So we can either take,
at this point,
we can either take the long way. Yeah, that's fantastic. So it's still New York, basically, is what you're telling me. It's dangerous. Yeah. There's infinite things to find.
Really, not much about America has changed. Let's be honest. So that's one of the most important things for session 0, deciding where you want to play, because that will color the whole of the rest of your experience.
Because realistically, if you want to change where you want to be, it's going to be a lot of time being taken, or at least, like there's
travel is a huge part of Rad Wasteland, in that it's always dangerous.
Yeah, fast travel is not a thing in this game.
No. Getting a car, getting gas, making sure the car works, then driving there. All of those are, 2 to 3 session adventures on their own.
And then whatever you encounter along the way.
Exactly. Anything from Night Stalkers, which are these armored scaled panthers that have venom and are fucking jacked, like, those pit bulls that are way too fucking jacked?
Yes.
Imagine that, but a panther with a sickle bladed tail and venom dripping out of its mouth, and covered with scaled armor.
I feel like this is like some lab in Miami made this, and then it just proliferated all along Florida. And they
no one knows where they came from, but they're like considered to be the most dangerous predator. It's the dragon of Rad Wasteland.
Okay. Okay.
It's the most dangerous animal. So it could be anything from night stalkers to bandits to a fucking silly little robot who just wants to sell you a teacup. But if you don't buy that teacup, he will fucking pull the pin on the grenade on his belt. He just wants to sell the teacup. A lot of weird things that can happen.
That's alrighty. That's I sense a lot of just like protect the baby energy conflicting. Just buy the teacup. But he wants our car for the teacup. But save the baby.
But the baby. So yeah, picking when you start, super important for session 0. After that, you start building your characters. Mm-hmm. What is it that you want to do? Do you want to be someone who fixes cars, makes guns much better? Do you want to know how to shoot those guns better than everybody? Do you want to have experience healing people? Do you want to have more knowledge than everybody else? Because there's an entire class based around just knowing things, which in and of itself is pretty powerful in this game if you apply the knowledge that you get from your roles and whatnot. Mm-hmm. There's you can be a trader, just a literal merchant. Yeah. And that's a very powerful class because money, and when I say money, I'm talking about bullets, because bullets is the currency for the game.
Yeah.
But money is what talks in this game. If you've got enough bullets, you can pretty much do and outdo anything someone else can. Mm-hmm. And then once you've figured out what it is you want your character to do, and this is not a hard and fast rule, but I would always suggest to people that you have at least one character of every tag in the game, which there's 6 tags in the game, and every class has 2 tags. There's combat, exploration, social, magic, technology, and then I always forget one of them.
Is it on one of the Rad Wasteland docs?
Stamina. That's what it is. Stamina.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
And each one of if your class, your class will have 2 of those tags, and it's a very general framework for you to understand what that class does. So, for instance, if you're a gunslinger, you have combat and exploration. You're good at shooting things, and you're good at surviving out in the wasteland. Mm-hmm. If you're a trader, you might have I think it's social and exploration or technology. But if you have social, you're good at talking to people, good at wheeling and dealing. You're good at manipulating people to do what you want through your words, not necessarily through violence. Yeah. The stamina tag is about outlasting, healing, recovering stress, because a lot of abilities in the game run off of one of your health systems, which is stress, essentially mental fatigue.
Yeah.
Technology, obviously, you're good at working with different types of technology, whether it's analog or digital, building robots, that kind of thing. And magic is, I would imagine, fairly self-explanatory, but you can cast spells. You understand the way that intention forms into physical nature.
You understand the arcane, the arcane elements of the universe in a way.
Essentially, yeah. You're tapped into that part of the world, and having at least one character that has 2 of those having a character composition that has everything there will lead to long-term success. It's essentially the same thing as make sure you've got a healer in the party, a thief, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's no hard and fast rule for that. I'm not saying that you have to have those things.
If you want a well-rounded group, have all the tags. If you want to have a challenging experience, so be it.
You have chosen death. Basically. But yeah, it's basically just, pick whatever, you want to do that seems fun to you. After you've picked what you want to do. So that's choosing where you start, choosing your character, or a character, I guess, could be broken down into its own parts. So there's races, there's the classes, there's the background, and then there's the burdens. So the races, there's a lot of work that I'm doing right now with the races that I haven't fully finished yet, but humans, cyborgs, and androids or robots are the three base that you have in Blood and Sand right now. Mm-hmm. And those are pretty much finished. But essentially, human, base level human, you're well-rounded at stuff. You can do a lot of things. But you're not really fantastic in any one thing. The cyborgs, you're starting off with the same kind of stats that humans do, but you start off with a cybernetic attachment, and a lot of these give you some kind of upgrade but also have a defect to them because it's a low grade cybernetic, something that you were able to just scrounge together or put
we're all at
together
level 1
yourself.
here, basically.
Exactly. And robots, they're kind of interesting in the way that you can build them, because you can build a robot and have like the highest starting stat possible for like strength, and then just ones and everything else.
Mm-hmm. In terms of what the stats are allowed to be distributed.
Yeah, but when you punch something, it's going to go down, because robots, they're built for a purpose.
Yeah. They're specialized.
So they're going to be more specialized. Yeah. Now, in terms of the stuff that we haven't like finished in terms of like designing yet, there's lizards, which are basically like reptile men, and they have a bunch of different ways that you can build them as a race. They can be bioluminescent, i.e., they can glow in the dark. They can be very squishy, literally just an ability that they can squish into tight spaces, which doesn't sound, sexy in terms of like abilities, but more useful than you'd probably imagine.
Yeah, if they're mostly cartilage and minimal bone, then it's like, that door doesn't stop me because I don't care about physics.
You just squeeze under the door. It's like, I'm coming for you.
I want my teacup.
All of them can heal faster than normal people. Some of them have like natural poison weapons that they can spit at you, but they're a very like unique experience in that. There's mutants, which there's a lot of different kinds of mutants that I'm going to go into, but the general thought is like people who just have weird mutations.
Yeah, it's my general genetic thought. Augmentation. It's chemical augmentation, as opposed to just mechanical elements added to them.
Yeah, so like Dillo people, their skin is way harder than normal. People who are like half fucking cactus, like there's a lot of weird shit that you can do. Where they're just covered in spines. They just can't get hugged, but they can store a lot of water in them, and they process it efficiently.
That's like Powder, the movie Powder. That's what that reminds me of. No human.
Powder? Hold on.
Oh, that's a movie that you could enjoy if anyone wants to enjoy a nice human story kind of fictional movie. Powder is a good movie for that.
That looks terrifying.
It is.
That dude's face unnerves me.
What does that actually look like here? Powder.
It's just this albino guy.
Yes, it is. I'm wondering what the Oh yeah, that's what it looked like. Yep. Yep.
I don't know what's happening to him, but he looks sad.
Nice. But yeah. Cool. But yeah, so genetic augmentations of a variance, basically, like, it feels like something you could just like list out 20 of them and then wait for the rest of the community to fill out the 100.
Yeah, essentially when we build it, there's going to be a lot of different ways that it could go, but essentially these are mutants made from more than just radiation. Magic mutates things as well. It's less like sci-fi and more like whimsical's the wrong word, because when you're a cactus person, I don't think that you think of yourself as whimsical.
You know, it's a happy accident. You know, my parents started out great, and then I met Mama Lucy in New Orleans, and now I'm spiky.
My dad fucked a cactus. He was a brave man, not smart though.
Oh, Christmas cactus. It was always weird at Christmas.
And then the last race that I've been working on is called the Fodder. And these guys are kind of like the backbone of how everything in Rad Wasteland really works in a very grim way. These are dead people who were brought back through magic or technology, either one. And now they're basically free labor because they're the lowest rung of society. All they have to be paid in, if they're even intelligent enough to take payment, is a place to stay, because they don't need to eat. But they like it, feels good to them and it helps them. And there's like 3 variants of those. One's a revenant, one's and the revenant is very like control based. If he gets in close to you, he can basically burn out your soul with your eyes. Very kind of Ghost Rider-y. He doesn't actually do anything mechanical other than make you fucking crap your pants, and your character would like have to run away if you encounter that. But there's also ghouls, and they can actually talk to the feral variants of that race, and they're much stronger than normal ones are. And then there is, and I can't remember the name for this one, but it's essentially like an anti-crit tank kind of build. Essentially, they're almost impossible to take apart because maiming is a thing that happens in this game. Like if you get shot and the bullet hits your fucking shoulder blade and just disintegrates your sockets there, your arm's gonna fall off probably. Yeah, it's a thing that can happen. But those are the primary races. So you pick your where you want to go. You pick your race. You pick your class. We've already talked about classes. You pick your background. This is the part of the game that I personally am the most proud of. And you know me, I don't go around tooting my own horn very much.
On purpose.
Yes, I don't like doing that. But when I do, I do it because I feel justified in it. And this is my favorite part. I have, I think, 60 unique backgrounds right now. And Blood and Sand does not have most of them. Just so you know, see you looking it up.
No. I have a book recommendation for you actually that you reminded me of with your artificed people or whatnot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But anyways, there's like 60 unique backgrounds in the game, and most of them, as they are right now, come with a little written blurb that give you some kind of context for what your background is. And one of the ones that I think is most often commented on, like it's it's the edgiest fucking one that I wrote. So of course it's Starbucks. It's what everybody loves.
Right.
It's called the Dark Rider.
Everyone loves Reaper.
Yeah. Exactly. Literally, when you hear it, you're probably going to be like, "Oh, so it's just literally Reaper." So you're called
yeah.
The background is called the Dark Rider. Essentially, you went to a crossroads and you made a deal with some dark entity. And because of that, you were given power. Actually, you know what? Let me just fucking pull it up real quick, because it's not like, you couldn't use an actual example of a background here. Let's see. Come on, do the thing. There we go. All right, so with a lot of these backgrounds, I have story blurbs, and this is the one for the Dark Rider. Your hand is bleeding over the old, ruined, and cracked pavement of the ancient crossroads. Buried near it is the heart of a creature you killed. You don't like thinking about it. The blood drips down your hand, falling through the air, and you remember the reason you wanted to do this, why you needed to do this. The blood splatters upon the road, and the words pour forth from your mouth. You can't stop yourself from saying them. Something is gnawing at you. This is a mistake. Suddenly, a cool mist rubs your cheek, giving you a moment of comfort before the spike of anxiety rattles through your grit. The entity stands before you, its palm outstretched to you, its voice a whisper as loud as thunder in your ears. Do we have a deal? And then it goes into the mechanical aspects of the background. So one of the things that you get with this background is an additional burden. You're cursed. You and your DM have to make the exact details of the curse, but it must impact the character in a negative fashion and be enforced by the entity that the deal was made with. An example, the cursed one is forced to murder someone who means him no harm once a month, or the entity won't come to his aid when he needs it.
That's his jar of dirt, basically.
Yes, I've got a jar of murder.
Yes.
You get knacks with it, which knacks are basically like skills for this game. You get instinct, and you get to pick one. You can pick research lore or research magic. Essentially, the thought process with that is, to even have enacted this ritual, you have to have some kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
Of the ritual.
Well, either you have a magic background or you have a connection that knows magic.
Right. And then the items that you get from it, because all of the different backgrounds have different starting items that are part of your character. And most characters don't have enough bullets to actually like buy starting items. They just come with preset stuff.
Yeah.
Which I feel is fun because it helps you figure out where you're starting from.
It's easier to start with starting pieces instead of just being a naked Dark Souls player with a club.
Exactly, except one of the backgrounds is that, basically. Only naturally, the club is your arm.
Of course it is.
Because you lost that bitch. So the item that you get for this is the Corpus Cult, which is literally basically a magic gun that runs off of your stress. So from a mechanical sense, whenever you fire this, you're spending some of your one of your health resources, basically. It's one of the less deadly ones. Like, you can regain this resource whenever you sleep, but it fatigues you every time that you shoot it. However, the bonus to that is you're not using bullets, which is the primary source of currency in this game. And it's entirely silent. The gun isn't silenced, it is silent. It makes no noise. So it's a very good kind of a weapon for an assassin, or someone who just doesn't want to get fucking noticed. And you also get an undead rotty horse. So a rotty horse is essentially horses have not stayed the same throughout this entire time period. Imagine a horse with a beak, and essentially that's what it is. Because they kind of mutated to be able to eat cactus more often, which is something that horse actually will do if they're desperate enough, because their mouths are pretty tough. They can handle it usually, just not in large numbers.
Yeah. Okay. So a Roddy, alrighty, horse beak.
Yeah. And that horse in and of itself is a very like powerful thing to start the game off with. And you also gain the this like negative ability called Cursed Karma. Anytime a gold bullet is used, you lose 1 stress, and a gold bullet's basically a free floating point for people to use for narrative or mechanical benefit that everyone in the party has access to. It's kind of like inspiration points, but different. Does that make sense?
Okay. All right, let me think here.
So that's just one of like 60 backgrounds that I have.
Yeah. So, but you've basically created a large framework for anyone to kind of walk in and have either a framework, either a story to pick off of, and kind of, because it is kind of Mad Libs. Have you made sort of Mad Libby?
Yeah.
In that, like, here's some simple things that here's the gaps you need to come up with or fill out, but by the end of it, you will have a unique but coherent sort of story if you Mad Lib this well enough, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Another unique comparison that I never thought to personally make, but yes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we go back to where the entire purpose of Rad Wasteland is to solve the narrative role-playing gaps that D&D does not have. I know there's another gap you want to fill with in terms of consequences, but as it relates to these things, it's the, hey, instead of giving you a blank sheet of paper to write a character's background and story on, here's 60 or however many you make, here's 60 Mad Libs of different backgrounds of characters that you could fill out by RNG elements, like, you know, pick your die, pick your word, or just be like, this would make sense for this character, and now someone's actually focused on something. You're providing enough constraints that people can actually be creative in it.
Yeah, then that's the hope most of the time.
Okay, so we got the background part done. What's sort of the next part of, I guess you could say, the character creation?
So, race, class, background, and then the burdens, which we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And then after you guys have gotten all that done, really it's just about kind of meshing your characters together, figuring out the ways that they work together, and building off of that, because that's the goal. You want to have a group of people who want to work together, not just have to.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, they actually, like, their brothers, their sisters, their guild members, their cohorts from a long time ago, old friends.
People who actually enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
Imagine how fucking crazy that is.
Yeah, or they just, it's like, you know what? We're oceans 1,402nd, and this worked out pretty well. We can do this again.
That's how many oceans it's been.
Clooney is just like a mangled body from like Warhammer with like 1 billion wires going into his skull to keep him alive or something.
My God. Now that's probably something I'm gonna put in the game.
So right? There's just Overlord Clooney.
You joke.
But I have the pen. I mean, it's a keyboard.
But that is the thing I feel inside of me at this point. Do not question my insanity and what I am willing to put bullshit wise in this fucking game.
So would we? Granted, there's not extenuating circumstances in the character creation. Do you feel like all of that would be pretty much session 0 is either character creation first or location starting first? I think either or could just help inform the players. And then would that just be session 0? and then session 1 would just be getting those introductions sort of squared away, maybe the first big problem that's going to guide them for the next few sessions, and then sort of go from there. Like, does that feel like a decent surmise of it?
Yeah, I would say that. So the first session of the most recent playtest that I did, they were literally just planning an excursion and gathering the resources for it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, they all loved it, and a lot of people would be like, nothing really got done. And I'm like, you say that, but there was political intrigue, manipulating of different people, a lot of moving parts that went into that the players feel like something happened.
Have you been recording these beta sessions?
Not all of them. I did record the one with Marl.
Okay, and it was just you and her, or how many other players were there?
It was me, Marl, V, who you don't know, and Vanity, who I think you do know.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah.
So yeah, that was recorded, and that's where I'm pulling most of those references from. And actually, let me see. Did it finish uploading? I was trying to upload it. Yes, it did. I'll share the video to you now, because I will forget later. Yeah,
because my mind's percolating with things that can be done for this, but we'll talk about those later, and I need to make sure my life is balanced with all the things that I want to try to do. Okay, well, here's an interesting question I have for you, because as you and I have talked about, I have a D&D storytelling project idea that I'm working on with friends of ours, Marl and Will, and you're going to be a storyteller at some point, and I will be once I have a story to tell as it relates to tabletop gaming, so to speak. Now, what our flagship product that we're working on right now is a friend of Marl and Will's, Chris, who actually has a character he's had around since he was 14. That's an old one, which for those that don't know in D&D, if your character reaches so far in the game that they actually become an old one, that is, you've effectively beaten the game. Like, you become one of the gods, so to speak. Or you've even killed all the gods. Like, you've knocked out all the pantheons, all the gods are dead, you are now an old one. Which is sort of why D&D was created in, like, the lore of Dungeons & Dragons. So I guess my sort of question for you is, there's an obvious early game, but how far so have you gotten in terms of the mid game of Rad Wasteland and into the late game? Because it still feels like it still has that D&D vibe of an open world situation. You get to go across all of America, or just start heading elsewhere in the world and build up, and start imagining, what does Tokyo look like after America has fallen, or whatever like that. Like, does that have any effect? So it's kind of a very simple, but I'm curious to hear you elaborate on, like, is there a possible end game? Granted, in Minecraft you can go kill the Ender Dragon, but the game is technically never done.
I would say this isn't really a game that has an end. You can't really become a god.
Yeah.
You can get close to it in all shapes and forms. You might as well be a god to someone if you have the right equipment. Like, in this game, if you walk into a fucking place with a light machine gun and 500 rounds, you're god. As far as those people are concerned, you're fucking god.
There's a movie line for that. It's like, you don't call the man holding the gun crazy, now do you?
Yeah, basically. But the best thing that I could say would be the end game, is if your character has no reason to go out into danger anymore. You've slayed all your demons.
You've alleviated your burden, let's say. If your burden is if your burden is a finite burden as opposed to an infinite burden, so to speak.
You've gotten rid of your burdens. You've gotten a nice life for yourself, because most people in Rad Wasteland, they just want a fucking nice life.
Yeah.
Which
Relatable.
God, what a millennial struggle, right? I just want to not feel like shit constantly. Okay. Anyways,
You sound
totally not
like a crying Mr. Krabs.
totally not reaching into my own personal life experience there. Definitely nothing at all personal about the things that going on with that. Anyways, but yeah, that's basically the long and short of it. You play until that character's done. Or you feel like the character's done. I would say if you have to put like a what you call it, a tag on it, getting to like really deep guarded facilities, or old world tech, having access to like nukes from the old world or relics from other dimensions, that would be the kind of stuff that's like end game.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can go to other, places around the world. Now, I haven't really put a whole lot of time into.
No, that's a whole nother thing. Like at that point, we would want to be either.
Those are expansions, bro.
Yeah. You're hiring writers, or it's just your life's work, and you're just gonna be the one man doing the one piece that is Rad Wasteland.
One Piece, do.
So because it's my understanding as like a very low level D&D player is that there is a quote unquote end game sort of written into D&D 5e and going back, but naturally there is no real end game in any campaign. It's just I was curious if you'd actually if you ever cared to articulate a end game position, status, godhood, yada yada, or if it's just, hey, you've now solved all of your characters' like historical problems. Now it's like, alrighty. I mean, this is a psychology thing, but if you've actually fixed a lot of your personal life, maybe you could start considering helping the world outside of your life a little bit more.
Hey, you've self-actualized. Dope.
Now, philanthropy, but in a Mad Max kind of way. Like everyone else, let everyone else have milk and water.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, you could also just be a fucking absolute bastard, and your end game is
you could become the villain to the rest of your freaking crew.
Exactly. Which I always love people who take a natural villainous turn, not just their character's a dick because
the person wants to be a dick.
Yeah.
I want to put in a plot twist here. So plot twist, and it's like, okay,
That's not how plot twists work.
Do you know who M. Night Shyamalan is? Have you watched live action Airbender? That's who you are right now.
No, I don't want to. Don't talk about that.
Plot twist.
We don't talk about that.
Live action Aragon. I luckily never saw that. My friend Mercedes went and saw it for me, and she said, "Don't."
Makes me so sad to think about.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been so good. Oh man, I in real life I cried when I read Brom dying. Oh, spoilers for a 14-year-old book series.
Was that the dad figure, right?
Yeah, he was Obi-Wan Kenobi.
He was. He got the crystal. He got the crystal.
It was literally Star Wars, but with fantasy, much more fantasy. Excuse me, and dragons. Which what fucking geeky little boy, i.e. me, wouldn't just absolutely cream.
I love that series. I love that. I know people talk shit on it because like, oh, it's Lord of the Rings. I'm like, everyone's copying Lord of the Rings, you fuckers.
I hate it when people use like they're being they're copying something as like a valid excuse for like criticizing a series, and I'm like, I get what you're saying, but you're wrong, and here's why.
Every story
Literally everything. Yeah, literally everything copies everything. There's no more original stories, and that's not a bad thing. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
There's only so many stories that can be told.
Yeah. There's so many stories that are like built in our DNA. And at that point, the question is, can you tell that story within a variance?
In a more interesting way.
Yeah, in a more interesting or variance way. It's where like my longtime thing is that I've hated cliches because they're true, but you have to figure out how to reword the cliche to where it can apply to the current and younger generations.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like they have to, every generation has to learn the same lessons, but you have to figure out how to get that lesson into them because, you know, the classic, what is it? My mom used to always say, fill one hand up with shit and the other hand up with wishes, and see which one gets filled with faster. And I was always so metaphysical. I was like, this hand of wishes is really fucking full right now. I have yet to shit in this hand. like that didn't make sense to me because this one's already full. Like the wish hand is already full of wishes. This one is still empty. It's like because you haven't pooped in it. Why would I poop in my hand? Like maybe that's a little autistic, but like that's how I thought about it.
Mother, you're not making sense. Why would I defecate in my hand? Explain this to me.
God damn it. So yeah. I think the next thing
that's
yeah.
End game.
Yeah. Well, it's self-determinant at that point, you know. It's self-determinant by the DM.
At that point, you know, or excuse me, with the type of game that you're playing at that point, I would want you to be able to determine your own end. Yeah. To the story.
Oh, as a funny aside, DM, as everyone knows, is Dungeon Master, which is like the proctor, the one running the game, so to speak. Have you renamed the DM for this game? Like, what's the DM role named in this game, if anything?
If I had to rename it, I would call it Baron's Master, because the only other name that I thought of was Waste Master, and I don't want that.
Waste management, like. Wait, I thought that was us.
Wump wumpus, catty wumpus.
I was thinking like Fury Road, Monarch or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of Mad Max and Rad Wasteland too.
Oh, I expected as much.
One of the classes is literally a road warrior, and it's just using your car as the best possible weapon.
Like this character is nothing without their car. Like
yeah, basically
they show up with a moped, but it's a badass moped because it's got spikes on it.
Yeah, I won't argue with that.
I have nothing
because
to add
I don't like the imagery is too good.
Perfection is hard to manage, but you, sir, you have managed it on this day. All right. So let's actually jump into another part here. Because I remember you mentioning wanting to actually have more realistic role-playing outside. Like, because you've structured out role-playing to where people can actually pick up the Mad Lib sheet of creating a character with background, race, and all those pieces. But one gripe you gave to me that led up to us having this discussion, this interview, was how in D&D... it's very unrealistic in that you just got majorly wounded the night before in a fight, but since you get a heavy rest because you're in a safe tavern, your legs grown back.
Yeah, the health fallacy of Dungeons and Dragons. I've always hated that as someone who. And I say this, and I hate the way that it sounds when I say it out loud because it's like, I've studied the blade. But having actually studied a martial art, and the kind of wounds that people got from fucking swords and hammers and fucking maces and shit. Holy fucking Jesus Christ. Anyone who didn't die, they were the unlucky ones.
Yeah.
They were the unlucky ones because if you didn't die immediately, you had two options. You were probably horrifically maimed for the rest of your life, or you died eventually, but way worse, shitting in your bed from a sucking chest wound. Anything that wasn't one of those injuries, you know, superficial injuries exist, and you could have gotten stabbed in a non-vital part. That you're lucky then, I guess.
Sure, but
sucks, but even then, you're on a bed for like a month minimum, just so you don't open up the fucking wound again.
Yeah.
And so a big part of what makes Rad Wasteland is the fact that you're a fucking person. You're not coming back from getting this shit kicked out of you and going, oh yeah, I'll just go back out into the, you know, wasteland today. It's fine. No, you're gonna fucking sit and you're gonna heal for a little bit. So the way that I've facilitated that is through a two-pronged health system. There's vigor and there's stress. Vigor is your bodily health. If someone shoots you, you lose vigor. Stress is your mental fortitude. Someone yells at you, you lose stress. Stress also funds a lot of abilities that people have, whether that be them being able to argue better or take a better shot at someone, etc., is
engage in physical combat, period.
Yeah. Stress is the simple health that usually restores in about a day.
Yeah.
As long as you get a good night's sleep. To get shot, your vigor is going to be down until you can get to a doctor or somebody with some sort of healing implement, because unless you get into a bed and rest for a week or something, your superficial wounds even aren't going to heal. You, on a continuous journey through rough terrain, not giving your body time to heal by either staying put or getting healing from somebody, it's going to keep it from actually healing. That's kind of how the body works in real life. If you keep agitating a wound, it's not going to fucking shut.
So the question I have, because my mind's thinking about how complicated this problem could be, like, if the group's just going to say, all right, we're just going to hang out for 4 weeks and do nothing, is the DM, is the Baron Mass, is the BM, bad manners, is the BM then sort of put on to fill that 4 weeks of things happening, because, like, they're not, like, I feel like there's always sort of the challenge to remove fast travel if you're aiming for a certain type of experience as a DM. So, and then I guess the follow up to that is like, alrighty, well, what is the system in play that actually, and I know you have to keep this, you would have to keep this very simplified, but it's almost like there has to be some sort of regressive chart in play of the progress of your healing is gated by these factors. And there's going to be frequent rolls, basically, of, you know, it's going to be a vigor healing roll to basically dictate, like, oh, did you just reopen your wound because you decided to, like, get out of bed, you dumb bitch? Like,
so I tend to not try and bog things down through, like, crunchy systems.
Yeah.
So for me, that's a bit too much. But that's why we don't have it heal naturally. It's the assumption that unless you're staying, your character is deciding to stay put, we don't make it worse. It just doesn't get better. Once you get to a doctor,
and doctor apparently is the only form of healing, like, in this game, because none of the classes or characters that you listed earlier on, none of them was a cleric or a like, none of the healing or bard. There was no healing that was at least obvious in terms of any of the characters.
There's no healing magic in
but
the game.
Everyone could have, like, a kit or something like that, or something like that.
Right. You can find herbs that help heal. But they'll only take care of, like, superficial stuff,
preventing infection,
like two vigor, essentially, which is, most people have about 10 vigor, like that's the standard. So 2 vigor, that's 1/5. That's not a whole lot. It's basically going to close like a stab wound that isn't too deep. But yeah, pretty much a doctor is the only way that you're going to get healed in this game. You have to seek out healing at every opportunity. Otherwise, you're just fucked. Now, from that perspective, that's a quest in and of itself, in my eyes. If one of your friends gets damaged enough. And there are wounds in the game that last even beyond you getting healed by a doctor, called like critical injuries. So you remember how I talked about if you shot someone in like the shoulder blade and that like disintegrated that part of their arm, they lose their arm. That's a thing that can happen to you. And there's 2 ways that you can handle that. You can either get a doctor to reattach the arm if you're fast enough, and you're able to pay for that because it's a difficult thing to do. Or you can get a cybernetic arm. Because that's a thing that exists in the world. But there's other things that make it harder for you to just perform actions on a consistent basis. There's wounds that will like cloud your judgment or make it harder for you to do certain roles on a regular basis. And you need to find like a specialist to heal those kinds of things. But there is a class that you can be called the Sawbones, and that is the quintessential doctor character. Most people I've seen, they don't really play them. And I find it hilarious because then, there's always, people who play test that think they have, big dicks, and they go out and they get in a fight. And then they're like, I don't want to die. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want you to die either. But you've been shot in the gut 6 times and you're like 50 miles away from the nearest town. What do you want to do? Not die. We've established this already.
We've established.
Think, McFly. Think.
Did his character die?
Yeah, he that character did. The funny thing was he got found in the middle of the night by a bunch of fucking Yotes, which are just coyotes. And they just ripped him apart because they were like, oh look, free food.
And it's warm
and
too.
He was like, and he was like, what the fuck, man? And I'm like, that's what happens in this game if you don't respect the fact that you are in a fucking desert full of things that can and will kill you if you don't respect them. Like, that's the nature of the game.
So I think my question there, for just a little bit of player experience feedback that you might have received, did that person articulate that the game felt too punishing, that
person felt like the game was too punishing. And in that respect, there's definitely ways that you can tweak the rules to make it not as punishing, but that nullifies a lot of the experience that the game is meant to.
It's meant to be a Dark Souls D&D. Okay, I see where you're going with that. We're gonna Elden Ring the shit out of this.
I wouldn't say that it's meant to be like a Dark Souls D&D, because you're not really learning
through
patterns.
Dying. Yeah. But
it's more like,
but it is,
you need to treat the game like your character is a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
You just happen to have a unique set of skills. But I am 6'2", 330 pounds. I have no illusion that if someone came at me with a gun and shot me in the gut 2 or 3 times, I'd be dead. Most people would be dead. And in this game, if a random fucking bandit pulls his gun on you and pulls the trigger 2 or 3 times in your general direction, odds are you're gonna be dead. So most people need to come to the game with a thought process of, I don't want to handle most situations with combat unless my character has every advantage that I can think of.
Okay.
And I've built the game in such a way that even the combat-based characters that I've seen people play, they usually solve their issues in another way. Not necessarily not engaging in combat, but by not necessarily trying to win the encounter by killing whatever's on the other side.
Yeah.
For instance, one of the playtests I did last night, I didn't record this one. These guys were traveling through the ruins of New York. Like I said, it's a labyrinth. And out of the concrete buildings came these conch apes, which are basically apes that have the same color and like skin pattern as concrete. They blend in with that concrete jungle, quote unquote. And a bunch of them were little ones, and the gunslinger in the group made a high noon check, which, yes, I did steal that from Overwatch in terms of the naming convention. But essentially, he was able to kill most of those like little monsters really quickly. But he rolled something called a radiation symbol, and essentially that's like a critical failure. I still gave him the success, because in this game there's no binary of success and failure. Just because you roll something that is bad doesn't mean you don't get to also succeed, but something else happens on top of that. And what happens when you shoot a bunch of baby monkeys? The mama monkey gets pissed.
So I would appreciate you basing this out for non-players and regular players. So in my mind, in the world of D&D, the most regular die that is used is the D20. It's a 20-sided die. If you hit 20, the highest value, that's like a guaranteed success and a critical hit in a combat setting. If you hit a 1, usually described as a natural 1, that is guaranteed failure. And it feels like it's arbitrary. I've never read the system, but it feels like it's kind of up to the DM traditionally on whether or not whatever value is rolled in between the 1 and the 20 dictates the level of success or whatnot. It's like if they roll a 14, what happens? Is it general success or not, or nothing happening? Like, does it have to be a natural 18 or things like that? And if you want to add on the follow-up to that is the part where it's like, so you've almost given the DM like full the BM for Rad Wasteland to be like, oh, you know what? You get a nat 20 in terms of the next action sequence, but because of the radiation roll, you now have to deal with an exceptionally bad consequence from said action set.
That is the general way that's done. But
just clarify the first part. Like, what happens sort of in D&D, like when your players roll? That's like nat 20 and nat 1 are pretty like they're the binaries. But how is that gray area sort of defined? Like, I want to understand this, and I think it would be a good thing to frame out.
So on a mechanical level, there's no gray area. That is purely up to the dungeon master in terms of narrative flair. Anything below what is considered the success value is a failure. Critical failure, and this is not rules as written in Dungeons and Dragons, but it is something that people implement often, usually implement some kind of persistent negative thing. You get a critical failure in an attack, you accidentally swing through where you meant to, you hit your buddy or yourself somehow. Success is just success. And then critical success is, as you discussed, angels come out of the sky, suck your dick while you're fucking chopping this dude in half. Now, whether or not your DM puts in the narrative flair for these other degrees of success is entirely up to them.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says that they have to, or even that they should, quote unquote.
Yeah, because I've seen natural 14s with whatever it gets added on by, level advancement sort of equate to, oh, well, nothing happened then. Or even the game in Fantasy Grounds just dictates that, like, oh, you rolled a nat 14 plus whatever bonuses, but your swing still did not make contact. So it's like even going beyond the middle ground, the middle mark of 10, doesn't even equate to success in a Dungeons and Dragons game setting, at least.
Yeah, and we try to eliminate as much of the, like, nothing happens as possible, because that's boring. But anyways,
so okay,
back to the grays.
Yeah, well, yeah, go to the grays.
Me personally, whenever I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, if someone made a success that was just barely a success, I usually put in something that was like a description of like a tense moment or something similar to that fashion. But there was never any mechanical implications. There was never anything that really solidified that as a feeling of true, the word I'm looking for here is like something bad happening, I guess. It was never a truly desperate situation.
There was no true consequence or whatnot or something like that.
Yes, that's a better way to put it. There was no true consequence. With this system, and the dice system is called the Cascade System. Basically, your dice can cascade to become more and more positive, as well as the negative dice can cascade to become more and more negative.
And this is Rad Wasteland dice, right? Or is this...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Rad Wasteland dice. So the lowest value of dice in this game is a D12. If you are unskilled in something, you just roll what is basically your potential for doing something. An easy example I could do here is, let's say you're trying to pick up a rock. Easy way to frame it. It's a really big fucking rock. Like, the rock is me sized. Let's go with that. And you only have a body score of like 2, which is fairly common. That's like an average person.
Right.
All you would get to roll is 2 purple dice if you have no skills in athletics. Now, the D12s in this game have 2 sides that are completely blank, a bunch of sides with just one singular symbol on it, and then a couple sides with 2 symbols on it and 1 side with salvation. That is the critical success of this game. So there's always a chance that you're gonna critically succeed, because I think in a lot of situations and a lot of myths and fables and whatnot and that kind of thing, there's always a chance of something extraordinary occurring.
Yeah, you must.
And I don't want to
provide. You must provide for extraordinary to be an option in whatever experience. Otherwise, it's life's too banal.
Essentially, yeah. Now you're rolling those 2 dice against whatever the GM sets the difficulty as. In this scenario, 3 red dice, which are the same thing as purple dice, just negative. And whatever you roll has to beat the score of whatever the dice rolls, the negative dice. there's success and failure symbols that cancel each other out. There's advantage and disadvantage symbols that cancel each other out. And then there is salvation, which is the critical success, and radiation. They do not cancel each other out. They happen independently of each other constantly.
Both can happen in the same situation, basically.
Exactly. So in the situation that we were talking about with the concapes, he was able to kill all those minions based on an ability that he had, but he rolled a radiation, and that's what I used to fund the narrative of the mother ape.
Yeah, the mother brood
coming out.
Yeah, the matriarch horde coming out.
Yeah.
Happy Mother's Day.
Oh. They were like, yeah, Happy Mother's Day, everybody.
You're not.
And they were like, oh shit. That is a big fucking ape. And then one of them shot at it, and one of the bullets bounced off because the skin of an adult conch ape is basically concrete. And they were like, all right, we should probably push this car that we've been hauling, because they were trying to scrap a car for parts, down that hill so we can get to town real fast. And they were like, that's not going to stop the fucking ape from chasing us. And the other guy is like, you're right. And one of them was a bookworm. Literally just a smart dude.
Yes.
And he asked me, GM, can I roll to see if this thing has any weaknesses? And I'm like, absolutely, positively. So he rolls, he gets a success. And he knows that conch apes are horrifically like mortified by high-pitched screeching sounds. So he tells that to one of the combatants, and he's like, make something fucking screech really loud. And she's just like, ee! And he's like, no. And so she turns around and shoots a light post, and that reverberating horrible like sound, that sound makes the concave just start fucking
so,
because it was about to tear.
So these conch apes are basically just bleached venom, is what you're telling me.
No, for legal reasons. So they're able to escape because the conch ape, as much as it wanted to rip them apart, the natural instinct of it whenever that sound is happening around them is to run away. And they pushed the car down the hill, and they literally just rode it into town off of that momentum. And they didn't shy away from combat. They just knew this wasn't a fight. They were
equipped to handle,
in a position to win.
Yes.
In the terms of killing the enemy. Winning in Rad Wasteland is being alive.
That's most of life. So that
and yeah. And that's the general way that I would say a lot of people need to kind of examine the game from, in that lens. Otherwise, they're going to come at it with the thought process of, if I'm not beating up the bad guy, I'm losing. No, you being alive is winning.
Yeah, there is no wishing well with two wizards to wish back your friend. They're dead. They're gone. We might be able to reanimate them, but and that's actually where I wanted to give you that. So actually, the Mortal Engines book series, I think, would be of interest to you, especially as it relates to your bringing characters back to life. I know Dune does this as well in the second book, with bringing a character back to life and having intricacies about that. But yeah, I'll message that to you as it pleases. Alrighty, well let's.
Well, thank you.
I don't think there's much. There might be more, but we can talk about if we want to have a part 2 around this. But I think we can actually start heading for wrap up here. So where would you say you are between like in the development of the game as well as like preparing for like a final product of it? Because right now you're beta testing, so the game's, it's ready for Steam is what I hear, but it's not ready for like.
So I would say, in layman's terms, I am at the point of being almost done with the baseline mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of probably minor tweaks that I need to do, and once I'm done with those, I need to move on to the high end mechanics. So like you're talking about end game, I need to move on to like what is considered the end game of abilities and whatnot. And there's a lot of horizontal progression stuff that I want to do versus vertical progression, which vertical progression is numbers going up. Horizontal progression is new powers.
Yeah, variance to the power. Like, yes, you can shoot lightning.
Yeah.
You can have a very strong electric punch, but then that punch could throw out lightning bolts or charge a battery or something like that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot I want to do with that. And then the part about it that's going to be a real bitch in terms of like getting a product out is just writing all of the fucking words that someone needs to understand a game, which I'm not bad at, but I'm much better speaking it than I am writing it, because I'm a much better teacher in person than I am in a written format.
Roger.
Yeah.
Roger. I may have a solve for you on that one as well. A contact for a solve and everything. So.
Ooh, that'd be lovely. So, I mean, if someone was paying me to make this book right now, I would probably be able to finish it in a year if I was just doing nothing but working on this book. As it stands, though, it's probably going to be like 2 years.
Yeah.
Till I'm done.
Roger. All right, cool.
Maybe 3 if nothing bad happens.
Well, we are approaching 2 hours, so I think that's pretty good point to jump off at. Was there anything else you wanted to at least touch on before we get out of here?
Yes. Support my Twitch channel so that I can work on this more frequently at tableknights.twitch/TV. Or wait, no, twitch.tv/tableknights. Fuck, god damn it. I ruined it. Fix it in post.
Nothing's getting fixed in post.
Shit.
That's why I do this the way I do. I don't have to do a fucking edit. Are you doing any sort of open beta plan?
Yes. So, Blood and Sand is my first open beta that I want to release to people eventually. Right now, I'm still just showing it to people that I genuinely trust and wouldn't worry about screwing me over. But eventually, I'm going to let out Blood and Sand. Then I'm going to let out an expansion, or not an expansion, a test packet for magic related stuff, and then a test packet for more of like the high end technology stuff. And basically bits and parcels I'm going to release playtest packets for until I have a whole game.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Then we'll call it here. I don't even remember which episode, because I haven't done a JHP episode in like a year, I think. But thanks for coming on, Aaron. Again, you can find him streaming pretty much daily, or twice daily, it feels like sometimes, with the notifications I get on my phone, at twitch.tv/tableknights. That is exactly how it's spelled, but think of the knights as knights in shining armor, not evening time. So TABLEKNIGHTS. And thanks for coming on, Aaron.
Bye.